So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, I've got a great guest. This is the first for me. Not only is she a musician, she's an author and a motivational speaker. It's Charyn Harris. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And you're my first, musician, author, and motivational speaker. So I'm so excited. So before we get the ball rolling, I always do a check-in. Okay. How's everything with you, where you are with the crisis that is going on? How are you keeping positive, and how are you moving forwards?
This has been actually, I'll tell you, the first 3 months I was a couch potato. And because all of my tours went away, I mean, they literally stopped. And that was really scary because we didn't know what the future was going to hold. But then things started picking up. And not only that, I really started thinking about pivoting and thought about things that I wanted to do, like write a book. So I wrote a book. And that's been keeping me quite busy because, everybody needed time to reset in a way. So this gave me a really great opportunity to even reset myself and just time that we normally don't have on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this time that we've had during the pandemic, I unfortunately lost a business through the pandemic. And then through the pandemic, I had an epiphany. I thought I wanted to be creative again and start my own podcast. To lighten people's days, and it snowballed from there. So I've got to say that the creativeness. I can't even speak now. That's the word. During the pandemic, has exploded. With your book, which we're going to speak about in length very shortly, and the film's coming out and shows being done, and it's so nice that tours are happening again, and the musicians are getting on the road, and the fans are getting so excited. I even booked my first tickets the other day for a concert, and I just cannot wait. And it's not till February, so I've got a bit of time. So fingers crossed, it's okay by then. So before we talk about your book, I want to find out more about your life, because reading about it, it's so fascinating from where you've come from to where you are now. So, Sharon, what is your origin story? How did you start? Obviously, we know how you started life, but going from, is it New York that you went from?
Yeah. So I was born in New Rochelle, New York, and grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. Very tiny town. It's 4 by 4 square miles, literally.
Wow.
It's really, really small, but just incredible culture. I reflect, and I talk to a lot of my friends that I grew up with, and we talk about how we grew up in a bubble because it was very diverse. The arts were extremely prominent in my town. So we had summer artist a summer creative artist program. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So we had a summer program for kids to learn different instruments, which I started participating in from the time I was about 8, and started picking up different instruments, the flute, the violin. I think my neighbor brought home a violin one day, so I wanted a violin too, and then I wanted a flute, and I was just fascinated by it. I didn't start playing piano until a little later, and because I have long fingers, I don't know if you can see my fingers, everybody was like, "Oh, you've got piano hands. You should play piano." So I started playing piano. My intention was not to be a musician, but it was to be an attorney. I really wanted to be an attorney. And I love business, and I still do. However, I went to a concert. It was Rufus and Shaka Khan and Cameo, and I was maybe about 15, and I came home from the concert, and I announced to my parents that I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?"
Wow.
You don't want this. So I finally convinced them this is what I wanted to do. My happiness was really important to me. I didn't think that I would have quite been as satisfied having a career in law. And it was too early. When you're 15, you don't know what you want to do, really. But I ended up going to Berklee, graduated from high school fairly young at 16. And, and I was also involved in a lot of musical activities in school musicals. We had a fantastic gospel choir. We had a concert choir. So I had a lot of exposure to different types of music, which was really great. And I just loved it all. And my dad was a jazz aficionado. He loved jazz. And my brother played, he had a lot of rock and roll and soul, and had anything from Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Edgar Winter Group, to The Last Poets, to, good soul records. I grew up on the Jackson 5 and the Silvers, and, so I had this really broad spectrum of music. And because I was much younger than my brother and kind of like an only child, all I did was read the liner notes. So I'd get the albums, I'd put them on the turntable, I'd open them up, and I would read all of the lyrics. I'd go, well, what's down here? The musicians. Oh, this one's playing bass. And then I would notice that I was beginning to know who all the musicians were, which was, I think, kind of odd. But my parents knew where I was. I wasn't running the streets. So that was really a lot of fun, and it kind of became fascinating to me. So when I went to Berklee, it was a deeper experience. I learned about other musicians that I really didn't know about, other songwriters, other types of music. I had just great friends that I met Diana Krall was one of my classmates, and she was always super talented. Branford Marcellus was another schoolmate of mine. So I had these really talented people there. And although I played, because I was kind of more of a very traditional musician growing up, I went to a little old lady who taught me how to play classical and church transcriptions, basically. So I didn't know how to improvise. I didn't know modern music. I didn't know any of that. So I, went through the whole Berklee experience, learned a whole lot, and then I got out, and I'm like, okay, now what? I come home to New York. My mom's like, you need to get a job with benefits. So that was her whole thing. She said, so what, you have a degree. What are you going to be, a music teacher? I said, no, I don't want to be a music teacher. I want to be a musician. So it was kind of out of their wheelhouse. It wasn't familiar for them. I had a few friends who were beginning to dabble into music. There was a lot of great dance music in New York. This was the 80s. So a little past ago, it was a really amazing time. There were a lot of live bands, and I began playing in different bands. I started playing in clubs in Harlem. I started playing in wedding bands. I played in one band that went into the jail system, the prison system. So I was gaining a lot of experience, which was fun. But at that time, even though hip hop was kind of doing its thing and taking off, there was this whole other movement that was going on, especially in Mount Vernon, because Mount Vernon was home to Heavy D and the Boys, Jeff Redd, Albie Shore, Kyle West. So we had these kind of, it was on the birth of New Jack Swing. Teddy Riley lived in Harlem. So we were kind of interacting a lot with those musicians, and they were kind of more on the artist side. So I'm trying to bridge everything together, because I have my friends who are like really heavy jazz musicians and playing with Herbie Hancock. And then I have my friends who were, they were really into dance, and we would go to Paradise Garage and had all this great dance music, which was a lot of fun. Then I have my friends who were looking at being kind of soul artists, or New Jack Swing artists. And it was just like all of these different pockets, and it was just so fascinating, and I couldn't figure out where to go. But I knew I had to figure out my direction, and I couldn't figure out my direction. So there were a lot of bumps that I had to face, because I think when you go to school, there's a little bit of an elitist attitude when you come out, because I have a degree. I'm smart. I have a degree. But then there's a lot that you don't know just about life. There's a lot that you don't know about interacting with people. I wasn't like streetwise. I was very sheltered growing up. I was a debutante, so it was very structured. And if my mother knew half of the places where I was going and listening to music and learning about music and the people the people I was around, she would have had a heart attack. So ignorance is bliss. I didn't tell her. But these experiences were really important because I wanted to dig in. I wanted to be thorough. And it was great that I was able to have access to all these different worlds.
Mm. Mm. I mean, you say that you're not streetwise, but yet, if I read right, you went to LA with $800 in your pocket
I did.
on this new adventure, across country. I mean, what on earth influenced you just to, to leave New York and then go with $800 cross country to
I know, isn't that hilarious?
It's just crazy, honestly.
I did. I mean, who does that? I know my parents were like, you know, you're doing this all wrong. I was like, no, I'll be fine. I mean, when you're young, you don't think things through. I have an 18-year-old and I'm watching her now and I'm like, you just don't think things through. And I wasn't quite that young, but I did know that I had a degree. I knew that I could get a job. And that was kind of my saving grace. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go stay with a friend. I had another friend that had moved to Los Angeles, and I went and I slept on his couch, basically. He and his girlfriend had a little apartment in Hollywood, and I slept on his couch, and I got to meet people, and I learned my way around. And I think at this point in my life, I was beginning to develop those skills, those people skills that, okay, I know where to find what I want. I'm clearer on what I want. And I knew that there was opportunity out there, and the weather was warmer. So I figured if I was going to struggle somewhere, I want to struggle somewhere where I have scenery. And I knew one person when I moved out here, but I quickly ran into some other people that I had known. And I was able to always have a roof over my head, thank goodness. I did a lot of odd jobs that my mother, again, would have poo-pooed me about, from walking dogs to waiting on tables to running errands, being a personal assistant. And her whole thing would have been like, you have a degree, why are you doing this? Because I also wanted to have a career in music. I had to learn how to maneuver in such a way that I could go to jam sessions and eventually start playing gigs, but I could still have the financial peace of mind. So eventually I fell into a couple of really odd but fun jobs. Like I was a perfume model. So I used to spray, when you come into the department store.
Awesome. Awesome. It's like that Friends episode. Yeah. Hot ombre or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That was, yes. And then I started dabbling into makeup artistry. So I could make my own schedule up. Sometimes I could go back to New York. If it was an account that was big enough and they had an account in New York, I would go, hey, it's the holidays. I'm going to New York. I'll go in early, and I would be able to pick up hours in New York also, which was really great because then I'd be able to go home and see my family and make some money while I'm there. And I didn't have to have that, like I'm asking my parents for money all the time, because that was the whole point, to not ask my parents for money. So, I mean, when I first moved out to LA, I'd say it was maybe about a good 3 years of this, even though there were some smaller jobs that I did. And there were certainly some smaller jobs I did in New York where I had opportunities to travel as a musician and, as a keyboardist, and I was playing in clubs. And as I mentioned, doing weddings and bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, you name it. But I think after getting to know the landscape in LA and going on auditions, and, you kind of go on auditions and you hope that you get the job. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes the jobs fall apart. And all you can do is go, okay, I got to go on to the next one. And I just had this energy where I didn't really think about, oh, I failed or anything like that. It was like, all right, so you didn't pick me. All right, let me find out what's next. So to me, learning how to frame things was really important. And it was just, I was on this big adventure. And that to me was the most important thing. I was on this big adventure. I knew I had people around me that would keep me safe. So I didn't have a fear of anything happening to me. I did meet shady people, plenty of shady people along the way. That's a whole other story. But I kept my nose to the grindstone. I kept really focused. And I'd gotten a call to work with MC Hammer. He was putting together a band. He wanted a lot of girls in the band. And he had just done Pumps and a Bump. So I got a call to work with him on the Arsenio Hall show. So that was kind of like my first, like, oh my God, I'm going to be on TV. I'm really going to be on TV on a major show. So I fly up to Oakland. There's like a bunch of people. We're on his compound or something. We rehearse. We fly back down. We do the show. And that was it. And I guess at that time I had connected with a casting agent that had been casting a bunch of musicians for different acts. And then I get this call and she goes, okay, I have an audition I want to send you on, and I cannot tell you who the artist is. Look nice, and it's at the Beverly Hills Hilton, the Beverly Hilton Hotel. And I'm like, okay, this is the weirdest thing. I don't know who it is. I don't have any music prepared. And I had nothing to go on. So, I put on my little black dress. Everybody was kind of Madonna-ish, lace, black dress, denim jacket, whatever. And I go to the audition and I get to the lobby and there are a bunch of girls standing around. Some have instruments, some don't, drumsticks. And I'm going, what am I going to do? I have no keyboard with me. Do I bring a keyboard to an audition? I had never been to an audition in LA of this magnitude. And it's in a hotel, which was really weird. So there's this elevator that's like, it goes to a certain part of the hotel. So the elevator comes down. My name is called. This big dude escorts me into the elevator. And I'm just kind of like, I'm going to try not to be nervous. Okay. I go into the elevator. I get out. They invite me into a room. There's this other man there who has a great smile and is just very welcoming. And he says, hi, Sharon Harris. Hi, very pleased to meet you. Wait right here. So I wait right there. And out comes Barry White in his smoking jacket, silk pajamas, and monogram shoes. And he's massive. He's like maybe about a good 6'4". And he has this beautiful smile, just was very warm. I was nervous because I'm going, my mouth, I wanted to pick my jaw up off the floor. And I'm like, what do I say to this man who is like, he was among the ones whose records I used to play growing up. And I used to listen to all of his orchestrations and I was enthralled. It was like, oh my gosh. So I'm looking around. I'm like, do you want me to play anything? It's like, no. Okay. I'm auditioning for a band. There's no keyboard there. I'm in a hotel suite. And there were, plenty of people around. So it wasn't creepy or anything. But he just wanted to talk. And he sat down and he said, he looks at my resume. He goes, you went to Berklee. And I go, yeah. And he goes, solid, So
that is awesome. That is awesome. I mean, you were the only female keyboardist that he had apparently, and you toured for 10 years,
yeah.
was it?
Yeah. Just about almost 10 years. Yeah, it was a long time. It was a very long time. And I didn't play a note for the audition. And it was just kind of like, what sign are you? And I told him, Pisces.
That's awesome. That is wonderful.
That was pretty much.
Well, you know
then
they
called me and I had to commit.
Well, funny enough, you say about being the only female performer. Thankfully, the times have changed, and I think the world has got a lot more, diverse. Edwin Starr, yes, who is a wonderful artist, he had a female saxophonist for quite a while, and I was actually performing alongside him in Cannes, south of France. This is years ago. And I didn't recognize him. I embarrassed myself. I was in the green room and I was eating grapes and canapes. And he started chatting to me and I asked him if he was with the band. And he said yes, like in a deep voice, and patted my back. And then they went off to sound check. And then I heard War. And then I went straight to the side of the stage and saw him singing. And as he came off stage, he patted me on the back again. And I've never been so embarrassed in my life. But I suppose you wouldn't miss Barry White. I mean, come on, you must have so many stories about touring with that legend. You really must.
It was really the most wonderful experience I ever had. I think he got a kick out of us. There were a lot of women in the band at that time. He had a female drummer, female guitar player, female percussionist, and myself for part of the tour. And then he had female background singers. There were a couple of guys in there too, but and then dancers. So I remember one time we stopped at a truck stop and everybody was looking at movies to rent. And one of the dancers says to Barry, "I'll rent you some movies for your bus." So he rents him some movies. And he was just very gracious, but he would take us out to dinner. They'd say, "Okay, band dinner." And he was kind of like dad. He was kind of like dad, and a very sweet man. But I mean, honestly, where else are you going to have an orchestra behind you? So when I stopped touring with him, I honestly didn't want to tour with anybody else because I just felt like I'd been to the mountaintop, and I just did not want to destroy that. I was like, "Oh my God, what just happened to me? I'm really good."
And they don't make them like that anymore. They really don't.
No,
I mean, he will forever be remembered. And it's awesome to say that you performed with him for 10 years, which I think is great. And then you go on and you are now, am I right in saying, managing logistics and touring for Macy Gray? And are you currently doing that? Are you getting ready to get back on track after COVID?
Oh yeah, we just went to Scotland for the weekend, and we left on Friday, came back on Monday. I feel like we spent more time in the air than on ground, and it was amazing, and it felt really great to be back. She played Playground Festival in Glasgow, and it was just really awesome. And there are some dates. Dates are beginning to come in now. So I'm happy to see that. She's happy to see that. She loves performing. She has a fantastic new album out that I'm so happy I was able to work on and help coordinate it. And I performed on there a little bit. Awesome. And it's called The Reset. It's Macy Gray and her band, the California Jet Club. And it's just an awesome project. I love it. Her videos, she just did a new video for her single Undone with Frankie J. Grande, who is Ariana Grande's brother. So we're having a really good time. And, I never get bored listening to her, just like when I was just working with Barry. It's a little different for me now because I'm not on stage, but I'm standing by the side and I'm just like, her band is amazing. Her voice is amazing. And she's such a great performer. And I just love working with her.
So I presume she's a very nice person as well, because you've been doing it for quite a while.
Quite a while,
yeah. I mean, is she nice or is she a bit of a diva?
No. She's actually very, very sweet. I was just noting we've been having a lot of birthdays. We had like 4 birthdays in the band in the past month, and including hers. And she just loves birthdays. Birthdays are so important. She never forgets them. She loves holidays. And, and Macy's from Ohio. So even though we live in Los Angeles, she just has very nice, just really homegrown values. And she's very much a family person. And she's just really sweet. We have a lot of fun. She's a little cheeky, she is a little mischievous, which is fun too. So we have a lot of good laughs on the road.
Oh, that is awesome to hear. And then in your mixed bag of creativeness, you also host and you've created your own podcast, which is it Musician's Guide to Grit? So if you're not busy enough, you decided to do a podcast. I mean, if you could tell us a bit about the podcast and what it's about.
Oh my God. Yeah. So part of me doing what I'm doing in terms of writing the book and having the podcast, and through my many years of teaching and touring, what I discovered is that some people don't want to do the work and develop the grit. So I see a lot of people who have given up. I was talking to a friend of mine, a former classmate, and I said, how many of us have really gone on to pursue music? And how many of us have given up after going to one of the most prestigious schools in the world? So I realized that grit is something that is really key. And for me, growing up in New York, that's what I saw a lot of. That was part of the hustle. That was part of, knowing how to command the streets and convert it to business and convert to an empire or legacy or dynasty. And it's understanding that grit effort and what to say and when to say it, and just to keep going and not to give up, and to understand when somebody tells you no, not to take it personally. So how do you develop that grit? So the Musician's Guide to Grit podcast, that's what I touch on: resiliency, imposter syndrome. I have a lot of people that approach me and they say, well, I want to do this and I want to do that, but I'm scared. And I start to do that, but I'm scared. And it's like, okay, what are you scared about? What I learned is that when I went through that, there were people, because they didn't have a choice. They didn't have their mom and dad to fall back on like I did. They didn't have a comfortable home or a car or any of the amenities that I had. So there was a sense of urgency. Part of me moving to California was to create that sense of urgency, because I was really comfortable at home. I didn't have to worry about anything. So if you don't, if you're complacent, you're not going to go very far. Complacent people, they're just like, okay, I'm cool the way it is. How are you going to climb that way? So how do you develop this grit? How do you get that into you? So you're like, okay, I've got to do this no matter what. I have to have that determination. I have to figure it out. I have to sit here and get that combination until it happens. So you become almost like a little bit of a mad scientist.
I mean, again, resilience is something that a lot of us, I'm not going to say lack. I mean, I personally have got my own insecurities. I hate seeing myself on camera. I stutter from a stammer, which I've spent quite a few years getting over. So this is my challenge and my true grit, I suppose, doing the show. So then we go on to your book. So going from quite a motivational podcast, you've brought out quite a motivational book as well, which is The Art of War for Creatives, which looks awesome. I mean, if you can tell me a bit about the book and who it's aimed for and what sort of thing you will get out of it after reading it.
Right. Thank you. So, so The Art of War for Creatives. One of my favorite books is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And I have read that over and over again. And I love his quotes. He has a quote about colors and notes where he says something like, and I'm going to just kind of paraphrase it: there are only 5 colors, but you can make so many other colors from those 5 colors. There are only 5 musical notes. And in some scales, in some countries, there's 5 notes as opposed to 7 or 8. So you can make so many combinations and so many melodies from those 5 notes. He talks about things like understanding your ground, knowing your enemy, knowing yourself, knowing your footing. There are all these lessons that we can learn from Sun Tzu and transfer to being a creative. And I had this idea, and I think part of what spawned it for me was working in the environment, teaching young creatives, and noticing that their lack of awareness, and how could I bring that to them? I thought that was really important. And also, when I went back to school after getting my degree several years later, I went back and pursued an MBA. Getting an MBA, it just kind of taught me to dig a lot deeper in terms of business. And I really looked at how can I, as a creative, fuse my business knowledge, and how can I use those transferable skills? I can bring my creativity into business. I can bring my business into my creativity. I can raise my creative quotient. So your creative quotient, just like there's an IQ or an EQ, there's a CQ. And your CQ is how creative you can be. And that's something that I wanted to be able to share with other people, get them to understand that they're not alone. I've certainly had a lot of bumps. And when you talk about imposter syndrome and anxiety, when I first started working with Barry, I used to have to carry my sheet music with me because I'm not good at remembering music. And there was a lot of music that I had to play every night. Sometimes the shows would change and I would blank out. I would have episodes where I would literally blank out. So yeah, it was a little bit of a crutch for me, but also it made sure that the operations ran smoothly. So sometimes you have to do whatever you have to do. I wasn't always able to speak in front of people. So I had to learn how to gather my thoughts in a way that I was able to articulate what I needed to. I would have to have a script. I would write everything down. I would get incredible anxiety, and I would get clammy, and I'd start sweating, and I had a piano recital once, and I ran off the stage because I made a mistake. So I didn't know how to recover. And I would think in my mind it was the end of the world. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble. So part of in the Art of War of Creatives, I talk about reframing, resetting, rewinding, and restructuring what you're doing so that it works. Understanding what you're doing, understanding what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. How do you create new goals for yourself? How do you get results and get out of your way?
And that you can put in every way of life. It's not just musicians. You can use that in everything.
Absolutely.
Any more plans on any other books being released, or are you going to be?
Yeah.
You've got to be too busy, surely, because you literally are one busy lady. You really are.
Yeah, I am busy, and I create work for myself. That's kind of like my little. I create too much work for myself. So yeah, I am the Musician's Guide for Grit. That's going to be my next book. So I am going to dig a lot more into the grit factor for musicians with more tools. I'm also looking at courses, having online courses and webinars, which I'm really excited about. I have a bundle actually on my website where you get the audio book, you'll get the ebook, and I believe it might be the workbook as well. And there's a mini course attached to it. So I'm looking forward. I love when I have an audience and I'm sitting down and I'm talking to them and they're asking questions, especially the young musicians. It's just so much fun for me. And I'm glad I just have developed so much unique experience. And for me as a teacher, coming from touring in a real life situation, I was able to bring something very unique in because I really understand what it is to be a musician on all levels from the very beginning to advance. So that the book and the courses are absolutely next. I also have a couple of other books that I'm working on. I've been asked to write a book, get this, by the gentleman who designed the $100 bill. So he's a banknote designer, and he asked me, he's also a musician, and he asked me to write his biography. And I'm just like, wow, I'm really looking forward to that. So we've already started beginning to dig into it, and I'm learning about his story, and now I've got to start shaping it into a book. And he's got quite a story. And I mean, and when you think about creativity, like I said, it crosses so many levels and so many areas. And I just love that, he's a musician, but he designs books. He designs banknotes. And he's so prolific. If you look at the $100 bill, the one with the blue stripe on it, the US $100 bill, there's a whole backstory there. So, yeah.
That is awesome. I mean, just out of curiosity as well, because I'm a parent myself to two young girls, and them growing up wanting to, be whatever they want to be. It's my aim to let them be as creative as they want to be. Just out of curiosity, what does your daughter want to do when she's older? Because having you as a mum must be like everything all in one. Oh.
Yeah, I lost a little bit of the question. Can you repeat that, please?
So you being, your daughter's mum, she must have won the lottery because literally you're everything rolled into one. Motivational speaker, creative. Either that, or she's probably feeling a lot of pressure to follow in your footsteps.
So, my daughter, I really was very hard on her about school. She went to one of the top boarding schools in the country. And during COVID, she came home. She never went back there. She was like, I just don't want to go back. I'm just so burnt out. And it was this revelation that even as brilliant as she is, I need to let her be who she wants to be. She ended up getting signed off of Instagram with a major modeling agent. So this summer, she went to New York to walk in Fashion Week. And so she walked in Fashion Week. She's done a bunch of ads for from brands like American Eagle, Revlon, Amazon. I mean, she just turned 18. So she's been in New York for the past couple of months. And I told her school's going to be there. I want you to have this time to do what's important to you and just live. I think one thing COVID taught us is, why do we put so much pressure on ourselves? These kids are going to school, they're coming out with these huge student loans, and they're not even sure that that's what they want to do. So I'm letting her do something I was not allowed to do. I was not allowed to just discover who I was at all. And I think that she's fine doing that. She's got me by her side. So if she gets a little loopy with it, I'm going to shut it down and say, okay, you're going to school. As long as you're doing something that you love, you're being productive, you're moving forward, you're understanding financial literacy, understanding how to invest, how to save, putting yourself on a budget, being practical, and just being focused and strategic with what you do, everything's going to be fine. But so far, she's doing really well. It's so scary having kids now, because they're exposed to so much. And but if we can encourage them to figure out what they want to do at an early age and commit to it and explore it, that's the most important thing. Explore it, and do well, and don't quit. When we allow kids to quit, that's when we start having problems, because they start quitting everything, and they grow up having a pattern of quitting.
Yeah, I mean, I see life as one giant obstacle course. Mine personally is like, Ninja Warrior. But talking about your obstacle course, what has been the biggest obstacle that you've had to face, and how did you get over it?
Wow. I had a lot of obstacles, and I think one of my biggest obstacles was trying to, figure out how I fit into this world with doing what I do in music. For a long time, that was a huge obstacle, because I always felt like I was behind with everybody else. When I went to Berklee, it was really intimidating, because like I mentioned, Diana Krall was there, and, they had people who were not only lifelong musicians, but they came from musical families. So I really wanted to have, figure out what to do in here, in that world. And it was really hard for me to figure it out, because, and I cried a lot because I was so frustrated. And then I said, okay, well, I can't cry about it anymore. I just have to get up and figure out what I'm doing and how I could really stand out. But I think I found my niche. I never intended to be a teacher. However, when I started working as a choir director, and then eventually ran the music and developed the music department of a youth center in Los Angeles called The Place Called Home, and brought in the partnership with Berklee College of Music. And I was like, oh my gosh, all of my experience, good and bad, is coming together, and I'm able to just kind of do this power dump, I would say, into this one entity to grow and make this, I would think of it as like a little mini Motown, where I had these young musicians who wanted to know about playing. They wanted to know about the industry. And I had all the answers. I had all the connections. And it was just really magical to get them on stage and have them play like they're rock stars, and so life-changing for them. And I think that that's when I started really finding my purpose. Because sometimes you intend to do something, and that may not necessarily be your purpose. So sometimes it comes a lot later. You'll do something, you'll go, this isn't it. I don't know.
But it must be really rewarding.
That I found to be.
It must be really rewarding. Those young people that you're mentoring and teaching have gone on to play with the Black Eyed Peas and with many, very well-known artists. And you are an award-winning person now. I mean, I was watching on YouTube. Is it You Rock Awards or something like that?
Oh, yeah. The She Rocks Award. I was so surprised. I was like, I got an award? Because you do things just out of the love of doing them. And I mean, you never know how you're touching somebody. Now, I just love that my students still call me. and I've had even some people that there was one artist who she didn't really come into the music department, but she's got a huge career now, and we've been in touch, and it's just really great to see her thriving. Her name is Sid, aka Sid the Kid from the group The Internet, but she was a teenager coming to the youth center that I worked at. There was another one, Sonny War, who's a prolific, amazing blues guitarist. There's a young man named Bryce Vine who has a pretty impressive career, and he's like my nephew. And I just love that they still keep in touch with me, and it's so funny that I can go out for drinks with them now, though.
Yeah, when they get to that age. I mean, it's 21 in America, but 18 in the UK. So yeah, it's crazy.
It's just amazing that, but they still come to me for advice, which I think is really flattering. They still have questions about the music industry or about music, or how to grasp this, how to play this, and and it's like I like having that safe space. It's really important that I think for young people to have that. Young people can't always talk to their parents about everything. And I'm fortunate because my daughter talks to me about everything. So I'm glad that I have that relationship with her. But for a lot of kids, especially a lot of the kids that I worked with, they weren't always able to do that. So I love being able to hold that place. It's a very sacred place and very sacred space that I hold, and confidential. So they know that they can come to me with anything, and I'm going to come from a very pure place. I'm not going to judge them. And I just want to encourage them to do the right thing, but to support them on their journeys.
Oh, that's so inspiring. It really is. Again, being selfless, and helping others and making those memories for them for years to come. So we've got your books to enjoy in the future, and obviously The Art of War for Creatives. Where can people actually purchase the book? Is it from your website?
Yeah, so they can purchase the book on my website, which is Sharon Harris Online, and I spell my name a little different. So it's CHARYN Harris, HARRIS, online.com. That's where they can find the book. It's available in ebook right now, and there is also an audiobook that's on its way. There are some bundles. There will be some hard copies as well. So we're taking pre-orders now for the hard copies, and they can also sign up on the website, and that way they'll know about any webinars, any courses that I'm doing. I have a Facebook group also, so they can follow me on Facebook, and join in and join the other creatives that I'm working with. So much fun.
I will make sure I put all the links on the screen for everyone to get that book, and I'll be first in line. I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. And before we end this lovely interview, we've scratched the surface of Sharon Harris. We really have, because there's so many more stories. There really is. But before we say our goodbyes, if your life was going to be turned into, a film, who would you like to play yourself?
So, oh my goodness. I was not prepared for that. Who would I like to play me? Wow. Maybe Yara Shahidi.
Okay. We can see if we can make that happen.
Maybe Keys.
Awesome. I mean, the thing is, you never know. Having an interesting life like yours, I think that it makes for good viewing. It really does, and it's really nice to get the opportunity to speak to you, to talk a bit about your life and what you've achieved, and how motivating it is from that young girl from New York to LA, and now you've got a beautiful daughter, and you've got this wonderful life where you're being creative and bringing out some great stuff for people to read. But Sharon, you've been a great guest. All the best, and hope to speak to you soon. I'm going to follow you on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, not like a stalker, but as like a fan, so it's not going to be weird. And I'll make sure I get all the social media links all over, and we'll promote that book for you. But thank you so much for being a guest.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.